Welcome to our lovely future humans, ready for another self-agent, inspiring human potential topic of today as we use mindful mindset practices, the inner growth. That's because you have a securely attached, healthy self-worth lifestyle. So number one, what we are people, and the individuals who are using the word spiritual bypasser for a person who has what is a securely attached, non-traumatized life is really sad. So they don't know how to be mindful practitioners, even if they have titles like a Zen master. And that's because the minute you say you have laundry means you don't know how to use a prefrontal. And so while I do understand that I got lucky, Maria, because I got an ego, but I got a self-agent, and that's with the patterns of development pathways. I got to find out that my self-agent dominates second to my fear, certainty. So that's where my twin is very different. And that's personality patterns, temperament, attachment. I'm attachment trauma educated. Dr. Daniel Siegel is amazing, and as his PDP framework invites people to recognize that while we each carry a unique set of experiences and inherited tendencies, some are adaptive and some are constraining, there's also a dynamic potential to move toward integration, toward a life of greater clarity, connection, and compassion, which is why people integrate their daily practices with the paid and free and live content that I get to create as a content creator who gives you mindset practices. You like thoughts and emotions. That's why you're self-agent. We embody divinity because we are a person who embodies the whole self. You own the sense of self. Own means observe, witness, narrate. And that's why the spiritual bypassers are actually the ones who say, I have a right to get angry and in your face. You have a right to be yourself for sure. And I have the capacity to be an empathic, boundary, sovereign human being, as the lovely live viewer shared with me words as I told him a story. I'm a deserve to be saluted, a human being man who has unhealthy self-worth and could use Terrio. So when we have emotionally immature people, not mature, we leave it alone. That's also why we forgive the grown-ups who betray us. And they're all of them. The ones who talk to us about God, not as discerning, equanimous love. I know God to be discerning, equanimous love from my good Christian Catholic catechists, and then I share with them why are the other people who I did tell God about still hurting children and human beings and not doing the good that is noticing how we all are saved thanks to decentralizing and the self being able to prove how we all can be in homeostasis. So all science proves is that the kingdom of God is within every one of us. So what we do know. The ones who use conspiracies are mediocre and ignorant, and they're also not embodying divinity. So again, the spiritual bypassers, they have many stories and many timelines. They present to us yesterday's books, whether it be the medieval ones or others. I recently was presented how God is not being good to someone who also I will go and do a live on that one to share my 2 cents. But obviously that's a subjective experience. So as a child of God who moved into mysticism, if you read the chapter in the book I'm a co-author of, The Ways to God, my chapter is God is Discerning, Equanimous Love. You find out that from faith I moved to mysticism. With my spiritual experience, I got to start downloading. No, I was downloading before, but I then started to astral travel. My clairs got activated, which are the same as spiritual gifts. So when you hear the word prophet or guru or expert yogi or a spiritual master or enlightened one or a spiritual influencer, they're all the same thing to me. It's a human being who owns, let me explain it to you, the integrated brain. So their default mode network is downregulated, like Dr. Daniel Siegel taught me in a number of my courses. And then because I'm a conduit, because I'm not scanning Maria and you, so my neuroception is no longer actively in this survival mode. I'm actively in my safety to be social. So I'm not protective. I'm connected. That's why I have intimacy and the kindness of my inner child. But when you meet the ones who don't want the ventral energy, so as Dr. Schaefer points out, it is never too late to come home to yourself. But some people, their 3-year-old is very, 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 very afraid. And when a nervous system is in a constant state of defensiveness, thank you, Stephen Porges, he shares control is a warm blanket because they have difficulty dealing with uncertainty. And so that's why the people who are 3D, 4D, who only use stories right now, what they feel is that they are divine, and that by seeing source in others, they're freed up from their curses, karma, and chains of the ancestors, but that the ancestors are going to punish us by, volcanoes erupting, tsunamis coming, and basically all the ancient stories that I've been hearing in different, either medieval times or again timelines from Hindu, I believe, traditions. Again, I need to look into it, but I'm like, that's not actually what's happening. I mean, yes, but not with the story. I have the scientists to explain how the world works, the earth, like Neil deGrasse. Okay, so grounded in reality, it's not dismantling God. No, God is good, discerning, equanimous, loving, again. And as an Akashic record reader, I want to let you know also we have soul age groups. And so this is why it gets really in depth when you look at the embodiment of this whole divinity thing. You're a piece of source. I like the word soul. You have a soul, I have a soul. As Bessel van der Kolk points out, it gets tainted when you have trauma charges. But really, the soul doesn't get tainted. Your heart stays pure. I can always see your heart in my heart. That's at least for Maria, because I'm an empath. I'm a somatic empath, like all of the other people. But a self-agent, again, is a somatic empath who can then have empathic boundaries with their sovereignty. And it's called, as Dr. Daniel Siegel pointed out when I asked him the question, I think you need to differentiate more, Maria, because he explained to me we're all a guitar string, so we attune to each other's nervous systems, and I learned to differentiate more, and it helped Dr. Dan, although I'm sure you don't watch any of my stuff, but still I love the man. He's awesome, and it's thanks to him that I know how to explain to you how our embodied brain works, and then it's thanks to Stephen Porges that I can tell you that a sense of control is really a sense of predictability, and that people who are biologically rude, they are not acknowledging my feelings. They don't know how to. And so we are okay with emotionally immature people because we don't regulate according to their nervous system. We will re-regulate by differentiating. And that's why when people disregard disidentifying with dual awareness so that they can have their grown-up, the adult self, and then have with a good therapist all of their not grown-up self, the child parts, 0-1 attached panicky, 3-7 shame submissive, freeze of all ages, flight 11-12, and fight 14-15-16. Now they're on a journey to become whole at some point. There's a number of different ways people will present to you these child parts. I gave you what I learned with my lovely teacher Sue Martin from my certificate educational course, and I have the words for it somewhere, but this one is with Somatopia. Really great team, and I loved learning it. And I have a course with Janina Fisher. She talks about the same child parts with a different structure. And then I also have another course with Dick Schwartz, IFS, the internal family system. So there's that. And then I also have, again, a number of courses with Dr. Daniel Siegel and ICBM. So really, there's no demon and Lucifer, please. We can share the good news, but apparently, again, some people don't like good news because they want to take revenge. And so when you have a teenager version, which is the fight response, you don't have a person who's in the forefront with you yet. And that's why they have not come home to their true self. They still have shame leading them. And shame wears a mask. And with the teenager, it continues to use the mask. And even if you try to talk to a person who is actually, every time you speak, is interacting with you by speaking over you, and then their body is like, that's neutral, that's fake, that's love, that's fake, because ventral energy, as Deb Dana pointed out, and Stephen Porges, is something off-putting to the people who have a body that's in protection and that live pseudo-liveness, but furthermore that actually think that this is fake and that it's dangerous to have no emotions, and that it's not true that it's inherently enlightening or healthy to be non-reactive. And I've seen people follow millions, this human being who actually in bold letters also says, I'm going to dismantle with her one little finger the entire modern day therapist. And you think, wow, how many? Oh wait, they all. No, that's not true. It's not all. So here's where George Eliot, it is never too late to be what you might have been. So when people don't take ownership of their sense of self, they don't integrate. That's why Dr. Daniel Siegel explained what happens when we're near people who enmesh and people who switch up, so they have states of self. That's actually not very fun. I've been around people, so I can tell when I have been in the presence of someone who has different types of states of self, and I've talked to them too, and to a T they tell me what the therapist taught me. They won't come to us because they are afraid. And I asked the person who is actually very well aware, and they said, yep, I manage my three selves. I don't want therapy because I'm afraid of them. And unfortunately, we have therapists who are not healed themselves, which is where when I come across anyone who is, whether mystic or science, I say, look, I'm a mindfulness mentor, content creator, podcaster. So I support personal growth, spiritual growth, and I definitely, with Reiki, can support you and add to your journey and to support that which is your soul's mission or your life's mission. However, and this is where it's chit-chatting, because they ask me to share the channel and to share what I do, and I always appreciate word of mouth gets me people who do not need me, they need therapy. So because I'm educated on purpose, I say, look, I have trauma education and I know all about PDP framework, IPNB framework, adult attachment interview categories. I even have a course with this one's with Diane Heller and Peter Levine for styles. So what you just described to me sounds like you really want, and actually Pat Ogden would be great with sensory motor and not me. Because those first 3 years of life are all implicit, and they're frozen time capsules that once one implicit memory begins to unravel, they're all awakening, and every ascension energy, because again, God is good. So everyone can heal their trauma charges unless they want to pretend to be divine. And then they say that I'm positive vibes only, which is why wellness industry disregards, systemic and cultural trauma. No, we don't disregard it. We just know how to handle mindfully real life outside trauma. We have non-traumatized bodies. Self-agents know how to self-regulate. That's why our communication skills for the paid content involve anger, sadness, fear, disgust, surprise, happiness, and involve us exploring the texture of that, which is sensations. We also explore images, behaviors, affects, meaning. Okay, Peter Levine. So again, you contain it because you're a self-aware, accountable, regulating person. That's why the grown-ups who forgive like I do, the other grown-ups who betray us by staying monsters, and that means they're staying in their self-righteous contempt energy from their childhood trauma, and then they use ancient stories to just create groups. We forgive them. God forgives. And God is discerning, equanimous love. I won't speak for God, by the way. I'll speak for Maria as a channeler, yes, that there's not any fear of there being yucky, like confusing good or bad, which is what they continue to think that by blending all of spirituality, religion, all of it, there's idiots out there. I can't say anything else because Sam Harris points out the ones of us who are grounded in reality, we know that any of our cherishable beliefs can be falsifiable, but also what's ridiculous is separating philosophy into only religious and secular not touching when they can totally touch each other. I was watching a smart lady talk about Socrates and Jesus, and yes, as Socrates points out, let him who would move the world first move himself. And as our lovely Jesus, there's a nice quote, let me go find that. That lovely quote that I actually have read before. Let's see, maybe I have it here, but it might not be. Give me one. Well, actually, this one is Sadhguru. Friendship is not just for companionship and comfort. It is a mirror to all that you are and all that you are not. What's nice about true friendship is that we don't pat each other on the back. So we don't do, as we grow up, the teenager game of, oh, we're canceling people because they're not telling us what we want. Okay, so when people have mastery over anger, sadness, and fear, that's because you own the three subcortical areas that dominate the motivation of the personality patterns, temperament, and attachment. Again, the PDP framework, really great. And let's go and find the lovely quote. Hold on 1 minute. Here we go. If you bring forth what is within you, Jesus, they think he said it, what you bring forth will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And he shares his interpretation, someone does, of this. I won't read it. I'm going to actually share our lovely Hippocrates, who lets everyone know once, when it was before we found out what epilepsy was, they would call it the wrath of the gods. He said, once we find out what it is, we're not going to call it the wrath of the gods. Father of medicine wrote, men think epilepsy divine merely because they do not understand it. Now that we know what disorganized attachment and dissociative disorders and fragmented states of self are, which is why a person can in time disidentify with dual awareness, become aware of when they're in their prefrontal cortex with the adult part, become aware of states of self, fragments, child parts, depends, although it's very different. We all have the child charge parts. We don't all have fragmentation. And so there's, again, a lot behind it. Please remember I fuck it up and confuse it, but I do have my lovely notes with me. So when you differentiate, that will allow you to move into more integration, but that's only because you will be able to, if you're going to heal correctly, it's with a therapist, by the way, and then you move forward to doing more of what we do for personal growth and spiritual growth. Self-compassion precedes empathy. Then you make sense of what has occurred to you, and with suffering you can sit with it as you acknowledge what you suffered. And so by being in the present, which is why modern day therapists are not trying to have you manage anything, it takes time for you to face real life trauma until you know how to contain sensations, images, behaviors, affects, meanings peacefully, meaning that you can sit in the unknown with it. You're not ready to be a body in connection yet without someone walking you through it. And that's the part of why we have spiritual bypassers who think that this is a spiritual bypasser, because I'm a positive vibes only. I'm a ventral energy, neutral, and they get pissed off because they're self-righteous with contempt and they have charges that they want to project that they ignore. They ignore that their first 3 years of life matter, and the soul is the same in all living creatures, although the body of each is different. And so, again, let's forgive the grown-ups who betray us, because they also betray God, in that God created us in the way that we were meant to be made, and that people who are getting themselves healed are actually going to be healing. And the ones who have chosen to say lack of imagination for evil versus no, narcissists can heal, borderline can heal, disorganized attachment, dissociative disorder can heal. There's a lady who's writing a book, so let's stop talking about demons possessing someone when there's an explanation for how things come up, because there is, for every single one of those demonic possessions that I have on TV seen and heard about. I understand, as when they say neuroscience, everyone has something to believe in. I'm like, not really, but okay. And so the sense of predictability that the people who are not yet whole want, and it's a sense of control, they will hang out with the ones who will give them what they want, which is that they think that suffering is all there is, and they don't learn how to use their prefrontal cortex. And so the self-empowerment talks that I get to have is with those who know that bypassing the experience of your own self is what people will do when they want to get into your face and tell you that the world's adversity and injustice, you need to present it. And I just think, wow, that's a lot of effort. I don't really do any of this, and it's because equanimity comes forth from those who have discerning minds, which is where God is discerning equanimous love. The wrathful, pissy one that we do hear 3D, 4D talking to us about, again, some people are going to stay stuck in a time of the past. That's because they actually have not moved into the present. And because they have a body in protection, they also follow each other around like the flat earthers. They seek validation from each other. So they'll go to someone who says, I'm a spiritual master, I'm ascended, I'm a this, I'm a that. Oh, I confirm these are all the things you are. And see, I got validation of what I knew I was. They confirmed to me what I had already had a hunch on. Does anybody know what that means? When someone gets afraid, as Bessel van der Kolk points out, they'll seek outside themselves for help. When you're a spiritual guru, a master, an enlightened one, you're an experienced yogi, and you're basically a human being that has an integrated brain like Dr. Daniel Siegel and Sam Harris probably. It's like, okay, this plank, zero plane consciousness intelligence, we all are aware that there's science and spirituality looking into it. It's one big ball of energy, and the frequency obviously always wins because it's the smart dark matter, dark energy, don't implode. No one's afraid. You see what I'm saying? When you're embodying that divinity that people like to talk to you about, and then they go and head out over to their superhero, supervillain stories, yes, we're not afraid. I'm not afraid anymore because we don't use conspiracies, mediocrity, ignorance, and stories from yesterday's news. And that's also because an integrated brain has a default mode network that's down-regulated, like this embodiment, and differentiation is why I say Maria's always here with me. Just so you know, my ego, she's plenty present. And when I sometimes will say I don't do this or I don't do that, that's my ego too. I do a lot of things, and that's why when my facade friend said, you're a hypocrite, I said, no, I'm not. Then I said, wait, he might have a point. As friends always have a point. Friendship is not just for companionship and comfort. It is a mirror to all that you are and all that you're not. So when you're a self-aware, accountable, regulating person, and when you are, by the way, as a mystic, we do channel and download, and those who don't want to believe us or believe that it's bad energy, you can't make anybody understand that it's one big ball of energy, and that the ones who see source in all people don't actually have a way to understand it's a human being. And if they don't know how to be kind and have empathic boundaries and healthy boundaries, they're going to do this, I'm a healer and I told them, how dare you trauma dump? And you're going to think, wow, that's not a healer, and that's just another self-righteous person who doesn't know how to walk the 5D Christ consciousness, restorative, embodied, self-aware, accountable, regulating people. We see love in every person because everyone's a heart like we are, but that doesn't mean that we have to be friends. So, am I not doing enough to be saluted? That's where I got to be sovereign and have empathic boundaries. As a smart live participant shared with me words that I will be reusing so I don't forget them. That's how I get to keep things in mind. Candlelight illuminates damage beneath the feet with wave of lights. That's mine. So my facade friend, when he says, you're a hypocrite, I say, why? Because I'd say to myself, wait, let's hear him out. You just called him a hypocrite because he's not a consistent person, which all adaptive child part people are not. That's Cusco's. They don't know how to commit because they're avoiding emotional depth, and that's of themselves, not of me. So when you know forever growing, you know that you're a tree of life like I am, and that's why God is good, because free will. You get free will. You get to choose. Like I got to choose when I was a child, teenager. Stay open heart. Why would we close ourselves up? Sadness is about bonding. They're all being mean because they're pretending to be mean. They're just not knowing how to be vulnerable. I'm okay with being vulnerable. Yeah, what, are you going to make fun of me because I'm crying? Okay. What, are you going to make fun of me because I'm afraid? That's exactly how it felt as a kid, and I got to keep growing up. I'm not embarrassed because of emotions, but I definitely want to share my emotions in a safe space. That means with a functional child adult, by the way, because anyone who's not that yet, they're not ever going to be a safe space until they become a true grown-up of their inner child. So securely attached, healthy self-worth. Because mediocre, ignorant, conspiracy, evil, good, bad, whatever people like my facade friend don't commit to anything because they don't even know how to commit to themselves, which means that they leave their body to continue with the other soul age groups, and therefore not their integrated highlight. But my facade friend finds me a hypocrite because I say this and that are true. Wow, what I can tell you today as a smart woman who is also loving knowledge. As always, I have a master's degree and I continue to learn from academics. And then I take golden nuggets from the ones who are pseudo-intellectuals. Dare to dream, follow your heart, opportunity is calling. Now is the time to start. And when you do know that every person has free will, it's because God gave that to you. And science wants to say you don't have it. So with self-compassion, you will have the capacity to then move into empathy. Make sense of what has taken place. Integration happens only once you've welcomed yourself. So somatic empaths we are, but I can't make you actually love who you are. The body remembers what the mind forgets, Jacob Moreno. If you look at the body, that's when you're going to find out how a person is feeling and doing and being, okay? And then people can heal when they experience somatic empathy, when they feel understood just as they are, but they have to have access to their right mode, otherwise they don't have access to the sense of self. And if they have fragmented states of self and they don't know it, and they don't have this part of physically and humanly speaking welcoming all, that's why I make fun of Buddha. I say, sure, your ventral vagal portfolio toning exercise is great, Buddha, but if they don't go to therapy, it won't help them, because when the shit hits the fan, they're going to spread rumors about yoga bringing demons out of them, because they didn't think of going to Peter Levine, who tells you, okay, look, trauma memory, it's stored in muscles, bones, and tissues. It's a journey, or as Bezel van der Kolk will say, it might take 20 years, or Dr. Daniel J. Fox, I think is the middle name. So people who don't understand that there's a challenge for some to recognize how they feel, because they will shut it down, because they will have done things that will have taken place that their implicit memory brings up, doesn't have words. And so the moment a person will feel felt by another human being, and that part, that's when someone can welcome it back. But they have to welcome it back, which is why you can love, accept, and respect someone while they're in an emotionally immature state, if they're self-aware, accountable, regulating. So the friendship is not only a companionship, but it is something. So here's where true spirituality, you live a life of meaning and connection beyond the solo self. That's where differentiation happens. And you're not enmeshing, I'm not enmeshing. You love me and want to pour into my cup. I love you, want to pour into your cup. And that's through you having a depth of relationship with yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to have one with me, because if you deny access to parts of you, okay, so a person will feel felt at a deep level, but at that somatic empathic level, the person also has to understand what's going on. And that's why the therapists are who they heal with. And then they can continue personal growth, spiritual growth. And like Dr. Amy Apigan points out, even after years of therapy, sometimes there's still a survival mode that a person will be working through. Spiritual bypassers are those people who look at a person like me and in the wellness industry saying that positive vibes only is not true, because they don't know some of us are securely attached, non-traumatized, whole selves, sense of self. Okay, so again, inspiring human potential is because you're here. Otherwise, you won't stick around. And the academics are bountiful, but socially speaking, we're seeing a lot of the people who have pain points. They drag them around, they look for external validation, and they, with their little spears, say, we have a right to be. And so there's a little bit of confusion. No, there's not confusion. There's a very straightforward capacity for those of us who are self-agents to discern, and with equanimity and love, leave alone the not healthy self-worth human beings who don't want therapy, because it's not something we can do anything about. Once the fragment is shared with another human being and it is welcomed back in by the person who has self-compassion of their own self, but they have the psych education to know where that came from by having a flashback of, oh wait, this was with my mother, oh wait, this was with my father, oh wait, this is a... So they have to have those child parts present and know this is mine, not feel shame about it, but welcome it back, and then choose a better behavior. That's the part. You don't endorse your little angry butthole. I don't endorse it when it comes up to my mom. I'm still working on it. Self-aware, accountable, regulating, to mature emotionally, mentally, physically, all of the emotions. And anger is the first one we're working on, because a lot of people like to justify their self-righteous anger and say, and it's like, okay, we can use our ventral vagal energy and ventral vagal state, moving here, and then breathing, and it'll be called, in my case, a somatic, what is it called? Somatic, they call it an angry Buddhist. The somatic experiencing people I learned from, therapists. And I'm like, no, I'm not a Buddhist. I make fun of Buddha and he makes fun of me. I'm a Christian Catholic and Jesus suffered for my sins, so I don't suffer here. But also it's because, again, I use my prefrontal cortex. So when you understand that believing in yourself to the depths of your being is your job, then you'll be able to self-love and not be selfish in a way of being an asshole, but being like anybody else. So when my facade friend said I'm a hypocrite, I'm like, oh, that makes sense for the way you talk about things, yeah. And today it makes sense for anybody who is a left brainer alone. They don't like when two things touch each other, like science and spirituality. So they'll say, excuse me, you confuse in science spirituality. And I'll say, no, not really. I bring them together because I do personal growth, spiritual growth. I'm a mystic, Akashic record reader. No, I'm a mystic too. Reiki master. I'm a Reiki master too. Okay, then that's the depth child part who's began there. I'm going to build a breadcrumb trails to prove you why I'm right. And that's when you begin to engage, and then you realize, okay, so how about you tell me what your conclusion is, since you know everything, and then I will allow myself, thank you so much for sharing your 2 cents. And that's when you will not look empowered, but you will feel empowered, and you will be empowered because you just allowed a poor human being who didn't get a good upbringing to have the floor, and therefore their self-righteous contempt and I was right and there you go, and they will be committed to thinking that they're right all along, or they will notice that you're not nodding your head, and then they'll be like, yeah, whatever, that bitch don't know shit, and it doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, what I find funny is when I get into my little feels every now and then, like with the book, The Enneagram. Okay, they're not an authority. Go ask someone to help you read it. These are words that aren't matching. There's no need for us to get upset inside. It's all okay. That's how you continue to become the functional child adult of yourself. Because as Patrick Tian points out, once you are the adult of you, you'll hold your child by the hand, and then someone can be speaking a number of words and you'll be like, mm-hmm. So with that sovereignty, that empathic boundary, you'll be able to, or like Terry will point out, be a grown up and say, I'm under the impression that we have very different opinions. So I thank you so much for your time. I'm going to head on out right now. And so a person can only welcome themselves if they will learn how it works to be a human. And that's why let's just, again, forgive the ignorant, mediocre, conspiracy, good and evil people who are continuing to say that we're the spiritual bypassers, that we're the fakos, that we're betraying God, when no, we're betraying nothing. You're just using 20, 30, 40 books from yesterday with a bunch of 20, 30, 40 human beings. Might as well join the ones who don't let their kids go to hospitals, because that's exactly where those who are talking bad about AI, bad about technology, they can't keep up with what is the information of the World Wide Web. They're actively slowing themselves. No, they're slowed down because they don't know how to use two sides of brain. When you learn what the flow state is like from neuroscientists, it's easy. It's your human makeup. But you have to have a body that is in connection. And as you use the bright sides of neuroplasticity, you continue to use that which is the capacity to integrate. Okay, so science proves not only that all of our brothers and sisters' bodies are healing, so the kingdom of God is within everyone, but that if they stall it, it's because of shame, blame, fault, revenge. So when you see somebody who's saying, I have a right to be angry, and how dare you, I'm a healer, they're stalling their own healing. And then when they say that we are the ones who are faking it, and that the journey is a scribbly line, you just think, that's your body, not mine. I can cry, move forward, be afraid. Panic attacks give me great practice. They're definitely not the most pleasant. Some people don't know that there's a difference when you have a body in connection. You don't feel helpless. You don't feel vulnerable and like a victim of anything. There's no rock on me. I'm still breathing for now. I am concerned for air, and I am concerned for water, and I am concerned for food, but apparently everybody's finding the excuse that the environment is not threatened because of the way that the geologists, some of them, can explain what's going on. And I'm just thinking, just because we have explanations doesn't mean we don't have the capacity to choose to continue to move into, let's recycle, let's, conserve water, let's get the trash out of the ocean. Let's continue to stop being ridiculous with things we don't know about, like blaming demons for volcanoes erupting and tsunamis. And by the way, as a mystic, what I can tell you about Mother Earth and God and all of it, yeah, they're all doing great, as they are very proud of the children who are bringing forth. Okay, so we have these stories all in one big basket, and we like to talk about them. And like the timeline that I'll talk about on the live, I'll present my food for thought, and others will present their food for thought. The ones who are stingy, they don't like to do that. They get very angry, and they say, those are the liars! And then they go and hang out like the flat earthers, and they continue to just use their own brain with the left mode dominant. As long as they pat each other on the back and continue to love each other just the way they are, they will not. Well, Diego's family, they really always betray each other. That's what facades do. But what I can tell you is that once you've decided, though, since you stagnate, it's okay. Like my facade friend, he decided to not move into his whole self. There's a certain number of choice points you get before you are completely just, because we grow old. I'm 45, so I'm just saying Also, dark sides of neuroplasticity. Really, what it is one shuts themselves in the shame, blame, fault, revenge patterns. Also, you're playing out your unfinished business, the 0-8-year-old. But really, the 0-8-year-old already has a story because they were given a story by the time they're 2, and they didn't bother to go and tend to their first 3 years of life. So you'll see that they're capable to continue. Those who are cut off from Purusha, pure consciousness, and Prakriti, pure energy, they're cut off from it. These are different pieces of information from different courses. Again, remember, I bring it all in and I bring the human elements. So I'm trying to help you understand a non-bilaterally, an impaired bilaterally integrated. So they're not working with left and right. They're going to have 20, 30, 50 books. They will have had an hypothesis. I've done a research paper before. I remember when I got the feedback, and then I compared notes with other academics, and I said, okay, so their feedback was not the actual only way that it's meant to be done. So that's good to know. Quantitative and qualitative data analysis, completely different set of ways of doing research. But anyways, so once you have a hypothesis, the enamored with oneself and one focused, they're actually going to be so, like right here, and nobody intervenes, because once you have children who are bound down to you, the devotees, this is where's Sadhguru? I was going to read to you something about devotees, but basically it's where when you're not using two sides of the brain, you end up becoming a devotee, which just means that you're following somebody else's truth, even though it'll be a truth that you resonate with, obviously. So let me see if I can find it, because it is applicable to the stories that I'm sharing. And again, remember, it's not a race. People who don't get the bilateral integration, they can always choose to get that done and taken care of. That's exactly what spiritual masters, gurus, enlightened ones, prophets, anyone will know. All of our brothers and sisters, they still have options. They can totally get out of the self-righteous contempt. Patrick Tian is helping anyone who wants to heal their inner child to do so. Okay, so I have all these notes, but I can't find the devotee piece of paper. Hold on for me 1 second. We got Evo, we got, here it is. There we go, I had it right here. So, devotee, this is Sadhguru who's speaking, not me. No good, he says. He says, so when you still live by logic, and so logic, he doesn't do the psych education. I bring it in because I learned it, and I bring the human elements. Also because, forever growing, that tree of knowledge, again. So even Hippocrates knew it. We have different bodies, but the soul is the same. I believe in you because I believe in people being able to get to therapy if they need it. And also I know that not two trees are alike. And as Gabor Mate points out, children, they will not only have their own personality, but the parent will have a different way of interacting with each. So that's why it's really awesome to know that all the smart scientists share. We are all little angels. The ones who are not kind angels can use therapy to get out of shame. We don't need to make them out to be monsters, because they were raised by the monsters that didn't go to therapy either, and they were raised by more monsters, and that's all called transgenerational trauma, which is why, again, let's forgive the grown-ups who are staying monsters because they stay mediocre, ignorant, and they will say that we wield our mouths, and that's why the people who don't know what a devotee is, so they're going to continue just following that, again, sense of predictability, sense of control based on 30 books from yesterday. That's why cognitive dissonance is not something small, nor is structural dissociation, which is also why 3D, 4D won't go anywhere, because they will be completely blinded, as anger, certainty of anger makes you blind. And then because you don't want to hang out with everybody, and you don't have self-compassion, and you don't have compassion for others, but instead you dehumanize others, and you project that which was how you were treated. Okay, so again, there's a whole way that people will continue to externally validate each other, and then they will continue with the same narrative because they will have found one commonality. They share the same pain points. They share the same hypotheses. So they're like the monkey from the Jungle Book. And that's why they're also like a Peter Pan, because the narratives are for children. That's also why, to me, it's clear the 5D collective is going to be coming together here and other places, because we're grounded in reality and know that science doesn't disprove God. It proves the exact thing that Jesus shares. The kingdom of God is within us, heaven. So it's not against that which is being a kind human being. It simply explains that there's no need for demonic possession stuff happening, and that basically there's an answer to why people get upset. No, it's more than just that. So again, epilepsy was proven. It's not the wrath of the gods. It's not divine sent. And for the people who I have talked to about neuroscience, they will say, ha ha ha, everyone has something to believe in. And they will continue, and they'll look me in the face, and they will tell me, a mystic, I've seen it. And I'll say, I know what you've seen because I've seen it too. And I've watched plenty of documentaries, and I've seen what it looks like with disorganized attachment and dissociative disorder. And I know I learned things from smart human beings who are proving that no one holds a demon. And once again, you're telling me, who are you speaking for? I thought you knew God doesn't make mistakes. So if everyone is proven to be an angel that can have a healed heart, why are you going against that? That's the hypocrisy. So while my friend calls me a hypocrite because I will bring science and spirituality together, I call my friend a hypocrite because he doesn't know how to keep his word. And because as any adaptive child part, an emotionally immature person, all they want is love, not work. So they don't take ownership for what they will have brought to the table as friends. And I'll share this story again, actually, because my friend is the reason why I don't yell in anybody's face, like actually with anger. So first, I'll finish the devotee one. When you still live by logic. So again, when people have the left mode, they're not using two together. You choose to use both. But you can only if you have access to the sense of self, which means you have access to you, which means you want to be yourself. So you're finally okay with self-compassion, self-love, and we're all flawed, imperfect, okay? And you're not projecting any behavior. In fact, you don't endorse that which is bad behavior involving self-righteousness. And we all have ego, so nobody's going to need to get rid of ego. Self-empowerment talks, when they talk to you about darkness, soul, and ego death, when we have our lives with the questions that I answer, and even episodes for paid and free content, we're going to look at that one because, yeah, your ego don't die. It's your ego expands if you expand. And I was looking, so self-righteous energy, this is where, thank you, Patrick Tiahan, is often learned and is the reserve of childhood pain that is aimed at others directly or privately. And I was looking also for Ron Siegel's quote. Thank you for the confirmation. Our psychiatric diagnostic system does not carve nature at its joints. Rather, it is we as clinicians looking for some kind of pattern. But each individual is different, and these patterns overlay one another. And Patrick Tiahan, our triggers often prevent us from seeing the other person's humanity. As well as Patrick Tiahan also shares with you how if you don't heal that which was what was broken, the faith that was broken, we can't rebuild having faith in people until we talk about how it got broken. And you cannot raise your vibration, live in abundance, or manifest your way through childhood trauma, which is accurate. Okay, so devotee who uses only the left brain because they're not really consistently at all handling all of them, and so they're leading with that teenager, the adaptive child part. It's a child's version of what a grown-up could have, should have, would have done, and it's protecting all the wounds. And they therefore will only use a certain amount of, again, books and things, and they will have ways to completely disengage what you're giving them because their security is there's good and bad, and these are the only two ways it works. And if you're bringing me anything else, I'm going to get upset, which you'll notice. Well, I mean, I don't, because I just consistently, by the time I've tried to open up our conversation to more, I'll notice if you're bringing me around a little merry-go-round, because that's exactly how limited consciousness works. It can only see 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it'll say you're a hypocrite. The minute that you begin to try to expand a conversation, and I kid you not, this has happened, you are being a hypocrite. You are going against what you're speaking, because this is where they're beginning to notice something on the, again, where, like my friend shared, they think that you're saying something different. And it's explainable by Dr. Daniel Siegel explaining to me how the left works, which is it doesn't like when some things start touching. So it's like a little kid who, if you're scribbling outside the lines, they're like going to freak out, basically. Or that's what's happening, even though, again, it's the subconscious, not conscious. So when you still live by logic, whatever is said by whoever, you want to, this is Sadhguru sharing, you want to push it, you want to put it to the test. And this is him trying to say you want to go beyond that which is your comfort zone. But the reason why we have so many spiritual bypassers, by the way, in our community are that they're not their whole self. They don't own their sense of self, and so they're not using a two-sided brain to evaluate information, but they're coming at it with already an end game. You're coming at it, and there's no mindful. There's no mindful. If you're all upset and tense inside, there's no mindful. Mindful means that you're aware of how you're reading, how you're assimilating, and you'll be aware if there's resistance to it. Whenever I read anything that there's resistance, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to pause myself, start over, and then if I still am not able to do that, I'm going to ask for someone to read it with me. That way they can bring to me the clarity that I'm obviously not bringing because I'm upset. And the upset makes me taint things. And sometimes I'm not even upset and I'm going to read something in a whole wrong way. So being able to be self-aware, again, and accountable and regulating is when people know how to use that which is the word of wisdom and just wisdom within you, understanding and embodying knowledge to diffuse conflict, and then that will provide clarity. That's why neutrality and duality, and that's why the land of truth is in the present, in the prefrontal, which means that you have the capacity to use our inner growth mindset, mindful communication skills, the paid or free or live, and this is easy and fun and you enjoy doing it, just so that you're again clear on how personal growth works, spiritual growth with me as we continue to finish up with our stories. And Sadhguru shares logic is a horrible thing if it is in a rudimentary condition. If you refine your logic, it can be the way to your liberation. If you become a integrated brain, restorative, embodied, self-aware, accountable, regulating person, you're not going to have any kind of stress as you are using good stress. So I should say you're not going to have the bad stress, you're going to have the good stress because you're at a higher frequency, because you're able to use an embodied brain, but also because integration of the brain means that your brain is working faster. And that's why some people, when they are feeling very overwhelmed, I just think of how Dr. Daniel Siegel explains 6 to 8 weeks for one new synapses connection to be created. This is with neuroplasticity and that point of view. Then there's like neurogenesis, so you're growing new neurons from the hippocampus. Then there's synaptogenesis, which are new synaptic connections. With that being done, there's a laying down of myelin, and the myelin production is from the glial cells, those supportive cells that allow the conduction speed among interconnected neurons to become basically 100 times faster. The refractory period, which is a resting period, 30 times faster, and so then you'll have 3,000 times faster, more effective in the communication. It's something that I understand. If you don't, it's okay, but when you're using the bright sides of neuroplasticity, you're supporting integration, which is why people will want to do the mindful communication skill practices, because that's exactly where the restorative embodiment, whether you use words like this or not, you're not bypassing adversity or injustice or the trauma. You know you have emotions, so they're no longer charges in a way that you're not aware, and you're not endorsing that which is behavior. I remembered what I was looking for from Ron Siegel was another quote, which is when we're talking about acceptance, it's very important to talk about the difference between accepting experience as it arises in our own body, and it is arising, and endorsing a certain kind of behavior. Okay, so when I get in my pissy pass, I don't endorse Maria and say, oh, keep doing it. No, I say, okay, let's calm down, read again. And, remember Sam Harris, if your beliefs are not falsifiable, if there's no scenario that could convince you that your most cherishable opinions are in error, then that's proof that you didn't get them by being in contact with reality. So like with my friend, he and I have been friends since we were teenagers, and I have plenty of friends. But before I keep going, Dan Martell. The most dangerous person in your life is the one who makes you comfortable with mediocrity. As the Enneagram would point out, my number one, I have 3, is perfectionism. And I'm a perfect, imperfect human being, as you can tell from all the videos that I do, because I don't need to focus on the surrounding. I'm not about aesthetics. I'm about what I'm offering, which is the word, right? The word, and coming together as people who want to inspire human potential. So we don't need external validation, and we don't seek for our soul's journey or our life's path for where are we headed. We like the guidance. So we're allowing ourselves to get people who we notice, okay, yep, they know what they're talking about, they know what they're giving, that's it. That's what a person who's a self-agent, who's a future human. The ones who are patting each other on the back, they're finding it comforting to have stories that bring them together like the flat earthers and to finally have a place that they call home. Now, I don't find that a good home because we have codependence, we have enmeshing, we have people who aren't their true self, we have people who have abandoned their inner child. But again, we are not here to tell all of our brothers and sisters that they can believe and become all of their self. That is their free will choice. And then the laws keep us protected. And from the prisons, those people who can get therapy, that's where our evil 1 to 9 end up in prison. They're ordinary people. 9 to 16 are the free ones who are apparently charming, according to Michael Stone, forensic criminologist. And 16 to 22 are quite clearly psychopathic, unhealed, and therefore they will end up in prison. And so again, let's hope that all those good prisons get better. They're not all good. I know that there's a lot of not good stuff going on, but that's why we're looking to have more of the people that work in prisons and hospitals and everywhere learn how to understand the mental health community. And when you have someone saying lack of imagination for evil because they don't accept that there's answers of how to handle psychopathy and how people can heal, that's an ignorant person who's spreading a rumor. But there's plenty of people who will believe that because they send hate mail, for example, to Kylie. She's a healing narcissist. So we are the ones who get to understand that. The ones who think compassion means we're giving people a pass, no, that's not it. That's the interpretation of the people who have shame still. And therefore they don't understand the word from the embodiment. And that's why they don't understand what the word shame means either, because they're not looking at it from the neurobiological, neuroscientific mental health perspective, and they're not even bothering to try. When you've closed yourself off to an explanation, you're ignorant, that's it. There's no excuse. You're just refusing data because that's what you decided as an obtuse human being. Not you, but anybody who does it. I'm not neuroscience, ha ha ha. Everyone has something to believe in. Okay, sure. So my facade friend, and then I will let you all go. Okay, so again, we embody divinity, meaning your own soul is with you if you believe in soul, but if you don't, you are a self, a whole self. Your child parts are asleep. So to me, secular, spiritual, one and in the same. If you're living a life of meaning and connection beyond the solo self, God created all his children so that they could enjoy the kingdom of God within them. They won't if they don't get their sense of self and an integrated brain, because they will live inside their bodies with, like the people who don't take their children to hospitals. Again, they think that they are the real, true, faithful ones. That's completely sad, because they just decided that, and it's also contradiction to me, because I never got taught that science was something we didn't have to learn, plus it explains nature, biology, cellular. Okay, so stories will always taint the data. Stories are what the adaptive child part people will go after, and as they choose to continue to hear what they want to hear, that's why the devotee thing that I read to you from Sadhguru. So adaptive child part people, they're not independent with the prefrontal. They're 08. They're subconscious. They don't own it. They don't own it. Okay, so with that being said, again, just my 2 cents. I and my adaptive child friend, I and my facade friend, I don't call him adaptive child, but I'm sure his teenager is ruling him as he got older and older and is a big fart now. But we didn't talk. I didn't talk to him for a whole 5 years. And when we came back together, it was because the rug got pulled underneath him. God sent him, universe, source, a message. And I was already with Claire, so I knew what was going on. And to bring a long story short, I welcomed him back. We had a very good chat where I said, all I asked for you is to be yourself. And 3 years down the line, I find out that he doesn't believe in God at all, mysticism, none of it. And I'd been sharing a bunch of my stories with him. And I'm like, why would you not tell me that? I waited till we got into the car, and I didn't actually do it that way. I actually did it a very different way. As we conclude this story, I and my facade friend are still friends. But did they grow up? Did they mature? Did they expand? No. And that is the part of where, while I can accept to be a hypocrite with self-awareness, accountability, regulation, so to be different than another person, the people who don't have the same capacity to notice their own emotional, mental, and physical preferences or not, that's why the emotionally immature person doesn't want to do the work. They want the love. So external validation, patting each other, the whole right or wrong. And so it's not about the rigidity of you're a hypocrite. Okay, that's where functional inner child adults know how to just chit chat about words and different ways of experiencing something, and whether we have the ones who are sovereign and therefore that embodiment of this divinity, the piece of consciousness, so you're an integrated brain or not, won't change for the person who knows how to be a differentiated self. With integration, the body and connection, and that's why we are humans from the future, whether mystic, spiritual, or mindful, and that's why we will forgive those who are the emotionally immature, quote-unquote monsters. I don't know, it's not quote-unquote, because some of those children still have those monsters. So I take healing trauma seriously. It begins with every one of us, and then we live a life of meaning and connection beyond the solo self. But you don't teach someone manners when they're biologically rude, because their 0-8-year-old is leading them, and their adaptive child part is leading them with a story. And then their sense of security comes from that story and from the Wendy's that they follow and so on and so forth. So again, it's quite clear when you have, whether it's a pseudo-intellectual, I'm a pseudoscience because I know what science does and research. And then we have the ones who are just bringing in their consistent timelines, 20 books, 30 books, and they're just staying all together so that they can continue reconfirming what is their narrative. While we don't do, let's confirm a narrative, we do, okay, we learn a lot every year that we move forward as a species that evolves, bringing human, spiritual, and spirituality elements together, me. Bringing you being yourself with the word of a mystic, an enlightenment, or a functional child, adult, mindful, living, loving person. You're aware of thoughts, emotions, and that you have biases that are implicit, explicit memory as well, and implicit, explicit biases that you can work with it, and that doesn't make it right or wrong. It makes it into where we just know the differences consistently coexist, and the more flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, stable, as Dr. Daniel Siegel would say, faces, that's what an integrated brain is. You're going to be able to differentiate and create a me environment, me plus a we, because that's what differentiation of the self with a person who's a securely attached individual, non-traumatized, because you can emotionally process what comes up, and then you have the capacity to also allow the floor to be taken over by an actual person who doesn't have any of what I just presented. I'm going to do enough to be saluted. And then when they say, at least you looked at me, you feel happy that at least they think they taught you manners. No, you don't feel happy. It's really, okay, neutral. At least they got it off their chest, so they're not holding it in anymore. But it's not actually their best version. But they think that they're actually great. The lack of self-aware, accountable, regulating people. I have a right to be angry. We all can be angry. We have 8 billion people and more, and that's why we consistently expand consciousness together when being our true selves. Join us, like, share, and subscribe. Help the channel grow, and have a good one.